We are live.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jake. I am a student co-president at the Westchester Youth Congress, and tonight I will be one of your co-moderators. Before we get started, I would like to make a few thank yous. First, I would like to thank you all for taking the time out of your evening to come watch this event. Second, I would like to thank both candidates for their cooperation throughout this entire process. Third, and finally, I would like to thank all Westchester Youth Congress members, some who you will see tonight and many who you will not, for their hard work making this event and our many other projects a success. The Westchester Youth Congress is a youth-run and nonpartisan civic group which strives to empower youth leaders to make actionable change for the benefit of our community. Tonight, we hope that This event is a great opportunity for you to learn about both amazing candidates for the Greenburgh Town Supervisor position, Mr. Paul Feiner and Miss Tasha Young. Now, I'm going to pass it off to Avik, who will give you a little more information about how this forum will work.
Thank you, Jake. So this candidate forum will consist of 12 topics with multiple questions per topic. Each candidate will be given an equal amount of time to talk on each topic, answering the questions asked on a specific topic all in one speech. While we encourage them to answer all the questions in the given topic, the candidates have the liberty to choose how best to allocate their time. Our timekeeper, Jeremy, will be holding up the time remaining. Once their time is up, candidates will be allowed to quickly finish their sentence, or they will be cut off by one of our moderators in the interest of keeping time. This forum is intended as an opportunity to display their views to voters, as opposed to debating one another. As a result, both candidates have agreed to not rebuttal the comments of their opponent, but rather express their own views on the topic. We will be alternating the speaking order and provide both candidates with an equal amount of speeches, speaking first and second. Each of the questions you will hear asked today were posted publicly 2 days prior to this event, as well as being provided to both candidates. If you're interested in viewing the questions as we ask them, the link has been provided in the YouTube chat, and you can also go to tinyurl.com/WYC-forum-questions. You can look at the link in the chat, or if you're having trouble finding it, you can ask other people for that. Lastly, we have 4 moderators for this event: myself, Samika, Jake, and Dylan. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Samika, who will be asking the first set of questions to both candidates.
Thank you, Avik. So our first topic will be an introduction and overview. Each candidate will have 4 minutes to speak for this section. Mr. Feiner, you will be speaking first. The questions are as follows. First, why are you running for town supervisor? What do you want the residents of Greenburgh to know about you as a candidate and as a person? Second, what management experience do you have that qualifies you for town supervisor? And lastly, what are your 3 main policy goals and how do you plan on implementing them? Mr. Feiner, your 4 minutes begin now. Make sure to unmute.
Am I unmuted?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so I could start over. Hi, first I'd like to thank you for organizing this forum. And I'd just like to mention that when I got started in public service years ago, I was a student. I was a member of the County Executive's Youth Advisory Council when I was 13. And I successfully persuaded the County of Westchester to build the first bikeway and to close the Bronx River Parkway for bicyclists on Sundays. So I hope that one day some of you will also run for public office and I'll watch your debating skills. I'm running for re-election as Greenburgh Town Supervisor because I love the job. I love helping people and I have a track record of accomplishments. Greenburgh has been cited as one of the best places to live in the nation and in Westchester County. And under my watch, we've developed exceptional services. We have terrific people living in the town. This is a dream job for me, helping people one-on-one and also working with a town board and enacting legislation that can enhance people's quality of life. Being town supervisor with over 90,000 residents and 100 million plus operating budget is a serious position, not an entry-level position. I have experience necessary to do the job and want to mention that issues and situations repeat itself. I've learned how to address complex problems. I've prepared and overseen our town budget. The last 2 budgets that I've submitted to the town board in 2020 and 2021 had a 0% tax hike and a AAA bond rating, the highest possible. Last year, I submitted a budget with actually a small tax decrease. I've overseen the purchasing of bonds, supervised millions of dollars of capital projects. I've successfully negotiated union contracts. Our town has almost 450 employees working in different departments, and I've developed relationships with local, county, state officials, community leaders, and government employees. I clearly have the experience and qualifications for a job that is not entry level. And unlike Con Ed and utilities, other government entities, when you call me, you get me on the phone immediately or a return call the same day, not an answering machine. My office number is 438-1343. That's my cell. The other, my home cell is 478-1219. My goals: to keep taxes under the tax cap. We've done that in the past. Unlike other government bodies, we have never overridden the tax cap, which is something that many other governments around the state have done. I want to improve costs and control costs. We need to continue to innovate so that we may run the town. A few years ago, we successfully reduced the sanitation workforce by purchasing new trucks using one employee instead of three, and an automatic hand that picks up garbage. Tomorrow at the town board work session, we'll hear from a vendor we're planning to hire to oversee what we call Fix It Greenburgh. Using technology, residents will be able to submit photos of potholes and quality of life concerns, and a GPS system will share the location with town officials so we could promptly and efficiently solve the problem. And next week, we're implementing a road repaving initiative that recycles the asphalt. It's called asphalt reclamation. Instead of paying over $27 a ton, we'll be spending $17 a ton. Those innovations are and efficiencies enable us to run the town better and less expensively. We also are promoting the environment, increasing organic recycling, creating more electric charging stations around the town, working with Solarize Westchester, promoting solar initiatives. I want to create a recycling center like Scarsdale where people could drop off recycling, furniture, and household
Thank you,
items.
Mr. Feiner.
Scarsdale, oh,
Thank you. Your time is up.
okay.
Ms. Young, your 4 minutes begins now. Make sure to unmute.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tasha D. Young, and I am so glad to be here with you tonight. Thank you very much to the Westchester Youth Congress for initiating, planning, and publicizing this forum. You did a great job, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you to the campaign staff and volunteers that helped me get to this point. And thank you to the Supervisor Feiner as well for being with us tonight. I'm running for town supervisor because my heart is in Greenburgh. For 38 of my 49 years, I have lived here. I see what's working in our town and I see what's not. From complex obstacles facing economic development to high taxes and lack of affordable housing. I love this town and I feel that we can do better. I am running to create a town government that tackles challenging problems in an inclusive, transparent, and responsive way for all of Greenburgh's residents. At the age of 3, I was a student in the daycare center on Manhattan Avenue that is now the Lois Bronze Child Care Center. Then I became a member of the Martin Luther King Jr. Young Adult Club at the then Fairview Greenburgh Community Center. Then it was the Theodore DeYoung Community Center, and we now know it as the Department of Community Resources. I graduated from the Elmsford School District, and my childhood connects me to a vision of how safe and secure background and education can afford a child a bright future. I went on to earn my business administration degree from Fordham University and then a Master of Social Work from Hunter College. I have 28 years of management experience. I've managed budgets from $3.5 million to hundreds of millions of dollars. I apply forensic accounting analysis and I cut waste. I worked for Abbott House in Irvington for 5 years as an executive administrator and trainer, managing both staff and 400 foster parents. I then spent 5 years at the North American Family Institute in Elmsford as a trainer, clinician, and Medicaid managed care director for 3 regional offices. 3 years I served as program manager at Today's Students, Tomorrow's Teachers in Elmsford, managing hundreds of students, 21 school districts, and 12 colleges. For 2 years, I also worked at the Theodore DeYoung Community Center as a program manager, and all of these were full-time positions. I was Chief Program Officer in White Plains at the leading not-for-profit for survivors of domestic violence, My Sister's Place. I supervised 3 directors, 1 senior director, and I promoted, and 60 staff members. My most recent position was Land Use Policy Director and then Chief of Staff to the New York City Council Majority Leader Lori A. Cumbo, where I negotiated large deals like the largest density building in Brooklyn, to small but critically important deals like securing 5,000 square feet for cultural art space or $50,000 for a cheerleading squad for children who lived in public housing. My background informs my policies, and I'll try to get through them very quickly. First and foremost, we need to go after new businesses with aggressive pitches and data. Second, we need to invest in our workforce. We need to retain workers in their prime working years by making affordable housing available so they could stay in Greenburgh. Third, I would work very hard to create enterprise zones by working with the Federal Small Business Association, the county's Catalyst for Small Business, and the New York State agencies that help small businesses. We need to bolster commercial tax base to take the burden off of homeowners. These government entities work to support our existing local businesses and new businesses, and we must partner with them. These are just a few of my policy initiatives.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Your time has elapsed.
Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Our next topic will discuss the town supervisor position. Each candidate will have 5 minutes to speak. Ms. Young, you will be speaking first. First question, what are your thoughts on term limits? Why should we or should we not have them? Second question, what financial experts will you rely upon for your team and what will you do to manage a sizable budget for the town? Question number 3, judgments and political positions seem to always be filled by relatives of people in power or by people who are heavily connected to the Democratic Party. How would you enable well-qualified outsiders to fill these roles in Greenburgh? And the final question is, how should the town determine when consultants are hired, how money will be spent on projects, and when resources like contractors will be used? Who will make these decisions, and what will the process look like? Ms. Young, your 5 minutes will begin now.
Thank you. We need term limits for the job of town supervisor. Term limits exist for a reason. They serve to counterbalance the advantage of incumbency. They put pressure on elected officials to anticipate problems and move quickly toward prevention and remedies because time is limited. Right now, our supervisor is late on the ball, waiting for problems to worsen before addressing them, from racial equity to economic development. We have no timeline or game plan. You see, the longer one is in office, the advantages grow as the elected official becomes less and less accountable to the people and more ingrained in the system of status quo. It becomes harder for such elected officials to look at a situation and say, we can do better on a system-wide basis because you've already lived with it for 30 years under your own watch. And we residents can begin to feel like it's an insular insider system. Supervisor Feiner understood this when he ran for election in 1991. He supported term limits then, but 30 years and 15 terms later, it doesn't serve his interests. I support at least a 6-term limit, and we would put that bill up for a vote with the town board because I look at term limits from an economic development perspective. In that amount of time, if I were elected and re-elected, long-term economic plans should be completed. Good government requires a turnover with fresh ideas and energy. In regards to the financial experts, my administration will rely on experts and manage the budget. My potential administration is already working on an economic development plan. I have enlisted the assistance of 2 not-for-profit comptrollers and another forensic accountant like myself to comb through the town's budget. The town board hired Grella, a consultant firm, for $60,000 for 15 hours a week of work, 15 hours per week of work. This is a short-term plan. Consultants will come and go, and we are left with the negotiation and implementation. Consultants solve short-term issues. not long-term ones that need a 5 or 10-year horizon. If the current supervisor needs a consultant, fine. But my approach would be to put forward an economic development plan on day one, which I described earlier briefly. I would also bolster the planning and conservation department to partner with the philanthropy department and together source funds from private donors and grants that fund economic development. I am already in my capacity as a candidate seeking amounts and ways to apply the stimulus money allocated for infrastructure under both the Biden and Cuomo administrations. I would also partner with technical assistants and consultants at the state and federal level. They are already fellow public employees being paid by the state and federal governments. Us are the taxpayer. As a government worker myself, I know that some of the most brilliant and committed minds work in public service. My background in building and managing teams enables me to cut through waste and inefficiency in government and put existing and available resources to their best use. As far as judgeships, we need to outreach. We are incredibly diverse in this township with law professionals from every racial, ethnic, age, LGBTQ, ability, and religious background. In a young administration, and by young, I mean Tasha D. Young, we would bolster outreach, work with the existing bar and judicial associations in the town and county, and be educated as to where fresh talent is and hire them. Also, as an insurgent candidate, I'm not bound to return favors to the Democratic Party. In the words of Shirley Chisholm, I am unbossed and I am unbought, and I do not owe anyone anything but I remain a loyal Democrat. I hope I have time, but the town should monitor, the town under my administration will have a clear and limited process for hiring consultants. But before even considering hiring a consultant, prior to RFP bidding process for private and professional expertise, we should search through public and government entities that already provide said service. Only if it were clearly established that no such entity existed, which would be unusual, we would then allow a bidding process that would include not only private, but also not-for-profit and minority consultant participation. Where applicable, we would also ask private consultants to utilize local and not-for-profit minority subcontractors.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Mr. Feiner, 5 minutes will now begin.
Great. Every 2 years, voters have the ability to elect supervisor of their choice. I believe that my experience has enabled me to understand the complexities of a town as large and as diverse as Greenburgh. It takes years to become accustomed to each of the wonderful individual neighborhoods that make up our great town. I'm an admirer of President Biden, who also served in the Senate for over 3 decades before becoming vice president. He has experience that has helped our country address the COVID crisis, making vaccines more widely available, saving lives. My decades of local service and knowledge has also been put to effective use. Our COVID Angels program, which I organized within weeks, has generated more than 300 volunteers who help secure vaccines for thousands of Greenburgh residents, well over 3,000 residents. This program has received national attention and national acclaim on NBC National News. It was profiled and has served as a model of citizen government engagement by the national media. I used my experience to make that happen, saving lives. During last year's presidential election, I observed what was happening nationally with the long lines. I had the experience necessary to oversee an effective early voting process that was cited statewide as a model. We were called setting the bar, setting the standard for the rest of the state. We live streamed voting locations live on the internet so people could decide when best to vote. We created special lines for the elderly to reduce the amount of time they would have to wait online, unlike any other community. and we even created no lines for the frail and disabled. I've used my experience in an effective manner. The last two budgets in 2020 and 2021 had zero tax hikes. We managed the pandemic effectively, maintaining excellent services, keeping our employees working, and retrofitting offices and ventilation systems to help keep our employees safe and healthy. And I always use my contacts and experience helping residents with problems. During the Con Ed outages, I lobbied successfully for reimbursement of food for people who had outages. That's something I worked on for a number of years, and it was approved last year. I've worked with student interns, successfully pushing New York State to repave some of the roads that they own that were in horrible shape. First time in 5 years that they repaved the roads that they own. Because of my experience, I asked the town board to create a Citizens Water District Advisory Board, which has overseen one of the most important infrastructure initiatives in town history, linking the Rumbrook and Knollwood pump stations. So if one pump station does not function, there's a backup for the other one. And I believe we received over $10 million in grants to make that happen from the state. During my tenure as town supervisor, our bond rating has gone up 3 times, not once, not twice, 3 times to AAA, the highest possible rating. That has enabled us to save taxpayers' dollars because our borrowing costs are reduced. We employ excellent outside consultants for bond purchasing. We have involved a citizens committee of residents with expertise in the bond market to help us refinance our bonds. That was done this past year, saving us over $800,000. We formed a committee with expertise on insurance issues to review our insurance policies and to make recommendations. We are the only community anywhere, I think, that prohibits candidates for incumbents from accepting donations from consultants and contractors, people who deal with the town. That's a model that no other government body, to my knowledge, anywhere has approved. Newsday said we probably have the strongest ethics laws in the nation. I asked residents to compare my record overseeing staff capital budgets with my opponents. Relating to judges run for office, the political parties endorse candidates. I've pushed for a diverse court and will continue to do so. 1 year, the local political party leadership did not endorse Judge Arlene Gordon Oliver's bid for town judge, and I helped her organize a successful campaign to become a judge. And I was also the individual who helped Walter Rivera become a judge.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates. Our next topic will be coronavirus. In this topic, you will each have 4 minutes to speak, and Mr. Feiner, you will go first.
Great. COVID has dominated
Mr.
our
Feiner, let me read the questions, please. Our first question is, how fast or slow will the reopening of Greenburgh be if you are elected? Our second, how will restrictions change as more people get vaccinated? Our third and final, what is one way that you can ensure that COVID-19 restrictions can be followed, and how do you plan on continuing to attempt to combat the virus in Greenburgh? Mr. Feiner, your time begins now.
COVID has dominated our lives, and it has also devastated the world. Even so, the town maintained all of our life safety services to our residents. Police, EMS, sanitation, snow plowing, road repair, and central administration were fully in force. We're working to keep the town hall buildings and our employees safe. The town installed plexiglass partitions in workplace areas less than 6 feet apart. These shields have been installed between office cubicles and at public reception areas. We also helped provide employees with safety by installing air filters in the ventilation systems. They've been upgraded to MERV 13 standards or better, depending on the ability of individual systems to accept the higher rate filtration. Disinfecting agents have been made available at all office workstations, and public areas. We've purchased advanced fog or disinfectant equipment used by our building maintenance departments, and the town hall public access, being the lobby, has been restricted. High-touch surfaces are wiped by building maintenance staff at great frequencies. We are beginning to offer programs for seniors outdoors. We are moving with prudence and thought regarding reopening the building. We have followed CDC guidelines and adhere to restrictions of the New York State and Westchester County. I interact with elected officials of adjoining towns and villages to learn what they do and to share priorities. The town pool and recreation facilities will be open for the summer, albeit with some restrictions. Safety is our first priority. We care greatly for our residents and feel it's very important to make sure that residents stay alive. We have the COVID Angels program, which I mentioned has helped thousands of people get vaccines. We're going to create a COVID vaccine hesitancy program, reaching out in the community, trying to persuade people who don't want to take the vaccines to take them, because not everybody who's eligible is taking them. We've gotten grants from Westchester Community Foundation, from UJA to make that happen. Obviously, we all want town hall to open up sooner, but if there's a greater spike in cases, which we're seeing nationwide, I think it's probably better and more prudent to be careful. And if it takes a couple weeks longer to open up, and we could save some lives by being a little slower in our opening, I think that's probably preferable. So I'm pleased with the way we're handling it, and our employees are also extremely pleased, because we've also offered helped arrange COVID vaccines for all employees and their families who want it after vaccines became available to anyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feiner. Ms. Young, your 4 minutes begin now.
Thank you. A fully reopened economy, which we all want, is dependent on herd immunity. We need to reach herd immunity as fast as possible and maintain it with booster shots as determined by the CDC. How do we do that? We need local access to vaccines right here in Greenburgh. We have a state-of-the-art Greenburgh Health Center run by Judith A. Watson. That center is getting hundreds of vaccines a week, but we need 1,000, 2,000 a week. That's where people in the Fairview section can walk to. It's where seniors in Greenburgh housing, if they were still there, could go to. It's where our residents can go nearby without having to miss work. As town supervisor, I would have worked with the state representatives who work with FEMA and county leaders to bring the vaccine inventory to us here in Greenburgh. We need vaccines, and we need vaccinators, and we need it now. We can thank Dr. Carol Allen and Bishop Wilbur Preston for setting up additional vaccine sites in the community center and at Christ Temple Church, respectively. But they are volunteers. It is the role of the government to lead relief efforts during the worst health crisis in over 100 years. What we have currently is our supervisor who takes sole credit for the work that others do. In this case, a Black doctor named Carol Allen. I see the many write-ups on the COVID-19 Angel volunteer program that tout the current supervisor as being so responsive and helpful solely with a group of volunteers. It's a national model even, yet he has failed to give her the credit that she is due in the press, and instead takes all the credit himself. We can thank Dr. Carol Allen again for the work that she's done for the COVID Angels program, and I would like that on record. COVID Angels are so helpful, and they are making appointments for seniors wherever they are available. But many of these appointments require people to drive out of town. Not everyone has cars or could take the day off. We need to support the Greenburgh Health Center, get a vaccination center at the Westchester Community College, and perhaps even also at the New York School for the Deaf, by advocating right now for thousands of vaccines there a week. We need walk-in, no appointment needed at the health center vaccinations. Under a Young administration, we would also partner with the Visiting Nurse Services of Westchester to implement vaccine shots to get into the arms of the extremely vulnerable homebound population, or as we at Union Baptist Church call it, the sick, our sick and shut-in. We wouldn't be complacent. We would work like we were running out of time. We would work with all stakeholders involved during the vaccination rollout. Dr. Carol Allen, along with the volunteers, have done a Herculean task with the COVID-19 Angels program. Judith Watson also, CEO of the Mount Vernon Neighborhood Health Network, which includes Greenburgh Neighborhood Health Center. We are trying to get to herd immunity, and we need to localize the vaccine, and we need it now. The restrictions, as more people get vaccinated, the restrictions set are controlled by the state government will change, as they have been. It is the role of the supervisor, in my opinion, to ensure town residents have information and access to resources on restriction challenges and updates daily. The supervisor has the resources to provide language or ASL translation so that residents know how to access the vaccines in the languages they speak and have the information they need to feel safe getting vaccinated. But I have yet to see this. I have a vision needed to be. Thank you.
For our next topic, we will be discussing racial equity. Ms. Young, you will be speaking first, and each candidate will have 7 minutes. The questions are as follows. First, how do you plan to bring community members of different backgrounds together to resolve issues, specifically those of racial and social inequality? Second, what is your plan to address the lack of racial literacy in our schools? Third, what actions have you taken or plan to take in support of the Black Lives Matter movement? Fourth, with the recent calls for police reform on a national scale, do you have any plans for police reform if elected? Last, according to recent data, 6% of our teachers are Black or Latinx, and 80% are white. Comparing that to the 29% of students being Black and Latinx, what do you think is the impact of this data on residents in the town of Greenburgh? Ms. Young, your time begins now.
Thank you. So research shows that diversity of faculty and staff has a beneficial impact on all students. White students and students of color form a social emotional learning perspective for all. And for raising achievement scores for children of color, we need more teachers that are of color. Now, I understand that our current supervisor reminds people that he has no control over the school districts, and that's true. But the supervisor's role is not only one of local authority, there is also inspired leadership of bringing people together with shared goals. That's what I would do. We have 10 school districts in Greenburgh, facing many of the same challenges, from racial literacy to school reopening plans to creating a method to curtail the pandemic educational slide of our children and lack of broadband access and devices. Inspired by ideas from current community leaders and existing advocacy groups, I would partner with them and the school districts to create the first ever Greenburgh Educational Consortium, in which the district representatives and local non-for-profits come together at planned meetings to collaborate, share ideas, and support each other on complex issues from post-pandemic plans to racial literacy, bias incident reporting policies, and more. It would be up to the consortium to determine the priority areas. One of the main persons I would tout to be part of this consortium is the Greenburgh resident and my former boss and church sister, Dr. Betty Perkins, the founder of the nationally recognized Today's Students, Tomorrow's Teachers program. Police reform. I view police reform in a way that it has to be referred to as public safety for all. Public safety is the role of the entire community and must be framed as such if we want power to be shared with the people. Policing is a part of public safety. Police reform in Greenburgh, to me, would be coordinated response units with the county's departments of the Office for the Aging, the Department of Social Services, the Department of Mental Health, Juvenile Justice Department, Child Welfare, and the substance abuse entities within the county that help people that are suffering from addiction. It would look like Greenburgh's police and courts working with DAs, the District Attorney Mimi Roca, with alternative to incarceration programs, and also implementing her impermissible consideration approach to arrest, which deals with profiling based on race, gender expression, and other protected classes. She has a platform that mitigates profiling. These are next level law enforcement measures that mitigate harm and danger that the Black Lives Matter movement seeks to end, without bringing the entire community into how public safety is reimagined, and without utilizing our resources properly throughout the county and the state. We are missing the mark. I have relationships and know-how on how to get this done, and would be honored to work with the men and women in law enforcement, both at the town and county level, to create public safety for more Greenburgh residents, particularly Black, Indigenous, and people of color, LGBTQ persons, the undocumented, and immigrants. For the schools, there's a data that says 6% of our teachers are Black or Latinx, and 80% are white, comparing to the 29% students that are Black and Latinx. What do you think this impact of this data has on the residents in the town of Greenburgh? It creates disparity. My job as supervisor is to serve the districts and help them achieve their needs in a more effective and efficient manner to serve the families that live here. I would advocate for the consortium to have regularly scheduled meetings and listen to the superintendents, parents, and students to see what their needs are. We have shared constituents, and we really should be working together on the Build Back Better plan. I'm informed in how to deal with equity because I'm a trained trainer with the Village Associates in race, diversity, and its intersectionality. We all have privileges. If you look at the power line that delineates who has privileges and who does not, you will find that there are factors such as race, having English as your first language, citizenship status, gender, even religion that can put you in a privileged place, while other factors, the same, can put you at a not privileged place. When you deal with the intersection and how people are affected by different variables, you're able to look at policy and policy implementation, not from a us against them perspective, but as a me perspective. How can my behaviors, my culture, my application, my approach to my neighbors be more inclusive? That is how I guide my life. That is how I participate in all of the organizations that I'm a part of. That is how I manage staff. And that is how I would approach the job as supervisor. By being informed with data and being informed with the current trends on how to be better neighbors, quite frankly. I hope to have the opportunity to implement some of these changes. And I really hope to be able to work with more of you on how we could be better neighbors to one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Mr. Feiner, your time.
Thank you. According to United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, only 56% of adults earning less than $30,000 per year have broadband services at home, compared to 94% for upper income families. And I'm very pleased and proud of the fact that the town of Greenburgh, under my watch, is working with the Greenburgh Housing Authority to secure broadband services for residents of the lower income housing that currently exists in town. If we provide our young people with the same opportunities to have broadband services as wealthier students have, they will have an opportunity to excel in school, and it's a high priority. I announced earlier this year that this was going to be a priority. I'm working with Winston Gordon of our Philanthropy and Grants Office, with Bishop Preston of the Housing Authority, and we are 100% convinced that this will happen at the time the renovations of the new Housing Authority sites are completed. And I think that's a really important initiative. When we're talking about students in the town clerk, Judith DeVille, and I, for over 12 years, we've organized a summer internship. This year, the students, it was a virtual internship. We had over 40 students from different school districts, all over the town, every school district in the town. They worked together on projects. They had the opportunity to meet with virtually with Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State, and our First Lady. They had the opportunity to interview and meet with former columnists from Newsweek, Time Magazine. In previous years, the students worked, lobbied the state to appropriate funding for road repairs on state-owned roads. They organized the first organic recycling initiative in the town. So we've provided students of a diverse group of students with the opportunity to experience government. And that's something that we are going to do, because we have a police summer youth camp. And the police summer youth camp, which we started over 20 years ago, enables people in the community to interact with the police, to get to know them, and to experience what law enforcement is all about. In terms of, we also have after-school programs with the town, and some students were nominated for 2 Emmy Awards a few years ago because of the terrific programs we offered. Thanks to Cliff Abrams and Ken Jones, we're making strides to support the Black Lives Matter movement with a 3-part project that includes a meaningful and educational mural on Manhattan Avenue. The mural will be featured on both sides of the overpass where I-287 stretches over Manhattan Avenue, and it will illustrate Black history from 1619 to today. The design will highlight Greenburgh residents and their accomplishments. Rocks leading up to the mural will be painted red, black, and green, with certain ones labeled with names of Black individuals killed by police. A QR code, which is a barcode your phone can scan, will be listed on the mural. That will help lead to a website with historical info and descriptions of certain images depicted in the painting. And I think that's something that will inspire a lot of people. Our police department, we're working hard to become a more diverse department. We're not perfect, but we're definitely constantly trying to do better. Currently, 19 Black officers represent 17% of the police department. We have 13 Hispanic officers representing 12% of the department. We have an Asian officer, a Middle Eastern officer, and 2 from the South Pacific Islanders. The immigration policy that the town board passed a number of years ago after President Trump started going after immigrants has been adhered to. And we're trying to work with our Hispanic community to protect the lives of immigrants who are so worried about the lives of their families and children. Out of 7 lieutenants in the town, 3 are non-white, 4 whites. The town board appointed last year a committee that produced a report to work with our police to address issues that have been experienced nationally. The town board recently unanimously approved a plan of action. We want to create a recruitment team, which includes community members, to devise and implement a recruitment strategy which will identify the obstacles to diverse hiring. We want to invest in our youth outreach to create a youth talent pipeline, enhancing our Greenburgh cadet program, our Greenburgh summer police camp, to encourage young people to foster interest in a career in law enforcement. We want to encourage colleges to offer tuition reductions for people who become local police officers. We are providing free test preparations for those who want to become police officers, because to be a police officer, you have to score high on the exam. And we want to make it easier for young people from our community to successfully pass the test and be offered the position. And one of the best ways is to provide them with free test preparation. We want to reduce the time intervals between the civil service tests and publications of the candidates list. We're petitioning the state to amend the civil service laws to make it easier to terminate police officers for specified misconduct. We're going to also increase training curriculums, de-escalation of force and aggression in encounters that do not require them to be aggressive. We are going to be offering, and we are, cultural sensitivity training, provide more training for mental health training, officer civilian interactions. We were the first community in Westchester to have body cam cameras placed on, given to every police officer. We're going to be using.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Feiner.
Ms. Bryant.
Your time has elapsed.
Thank you.
Our next topic will be regarding social equality. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to speak for this section. Mr. Feiner, you will be speaking first. The questions are as follows. The first, how will you interact with residents that have different political views than you? Second, how will you respond to sexual harassment and bias concerns? Do you have experience with this? And lastly, what will you do to combat the increase in hate crimes and violence in our community and beyond? Mr. Feiner, your 4 minutes begin now.
I have always appointed people who differ with me to different boards. My former opponent headed up our traffic safety committee. Another critic is a member of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. I have created land use committees and have invited my strongest critics to serve on these committees. Campaign contributors to past and present opponents have been appointed to other boards and committees. Government works best when those who are critical are included in the process, and I will always invite my critics and my opponents to be a part of the decision-making processes in government. Regarding sexual harassment, we are reviewing our policies. We're improving training. We're committed to a zero tolerance policy and believe that all allegations should be promptly investigated, and that if inappropriate behavior is found, that appropriate strong disciplinary action should be taken. I've been meeting with town staff, and this is definitely a high priority. In terms of hate crimes, I have suggested that the county create a hate crimes registry, publicly listing all hate crimes and what happens to the cases and the legal outcomes. And I could speak personally on this because a few years ago, I was a victim of an anti-Semitic incident. Myself and my family, we were threatened. The suspect was identified. The police made an arrest after providing my family with 24 hours police protection. And after the trial, the person was found guilty, but was sentenced to only 70 hours of community service, not a strong punishment. It's important that we track down every single incident, and we highlight publicly all the punishments that are made, because people will sometimes say they were the victim of a hate crime, and you never hear anything about it after the initial threats were made. And how many of the threats are actually, the people who commit these crimes are actually brought to justice? And is justice adequate? Should the penalties be stronger? So that's something that I would like to see happen.
Thank you. Ms. Young, your time begins now. Make sure to unmute.
Thank you so much, Samika. So the way I understand the first question is, how will I represent those who do not vote for me? And my answer is, I'm running for office to give that resident and every resident a voice. I am running because I believe in a more inclusive, transparent administration. I'm running because I want our government to reflect the diversity of backgrounds and political ideas in our town. I'm running because I believe that we reach the best outcome when stakeholders with different opinions come together to respectfully share ideas and information. And this isn't all talk. I have already included people with different political ideas in my potential administration. My economic development team consists of independents, progressives, Republicans, and Democrats. How will I respond to sexual harassment and bias concerns? Do I have experience with this? Yes, this is part of my plan for public safety for all. You have to acknowledge that there is a problem. EEOC guidelines give us the blueprint to create a safety plan, a suspension or possible separation while the investigation is going on. And we do not have that policy now. This applies to sexual harassment, human trafficking, and also applies to hate incidents and domestic violence. The town's responsibility is to be informed by what is already practiced by the EEOC, to partner with organizations like Hope's Door and My Sister's Place, police and the district attorney's office, as well as the human rights commissions. They will inform us on how to respond and will provide trainings. And in my administration, I would have a series of trainings annually. That is the experience that I have experienced, and it's made me literate on how to deal with accusations of sexual harassment in the workplace, boards, and commissions. We would make sure that we are held accountable by committing to a timeline of response, written document of resolution. There's no policy like that now. So survivors are held in limbo for over a year, begging for a response after filing a complaint in some cases. I, like many survivors of sexual harassment and sexual assault, negotiate with themselves whether or not they should do anything, whether or not they should say anything. And there is a fault in government that we have the responsibility of responding to accusations of harassment and abuse. A timeline, a safety plan, written policy, and annual trainings until we are all literate on how to provide safety in the workplace and in our community. I will bring that to the role of town supervisor.
Ms. Young, your time has elapsed.
Thank you.
Okay, our sixth topic will discuss questions relating to taxes. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to speak. Ms. Young will be speaking first. If elected, how will you attempt to lower property taxes? What other tax-related policy changes, if any, would you enact for residents of Greenburgh? Would you agree with the following statement? Greenburgh currently wastes tax revenue assessing residents rather than businesses. If so, what changes would you make to minimize this waste? And the final question is, how will you ensure that our tax dollars are being used efficiently and for good cause? Ms. Young, your 3 minutes will now begin.
Thank you. So property taxes go down when we, one, eliminate wasteful lawsuits. We are close to $40 million at issue, often because of verbal mistakes or lack of negotiation skill by the current administration. Increased business development and commercial tax base is the way you reduce the burden on the homeowner and other residents. More detail will be that and is a central and critical need in the next question. We need to reduce reliance on paying outside consultants with residents' tax money by utilizing existing state and federal employees trained and available to assist. Fiscal discipline. I am already combing through the budgets and found discrepancies and opaqueness. Working with procurement experts, finding unnecessary costs to the town's supplies would be one of my day one initiatives. Regarding fiscal discipline and reducing the the cost that the town of the town supplies. The town has purchasing power to no longer purchase plastic and can use alternative to plastic products like hemp, eco-friendly, biodegradable. This is a total game changer. If we wanted to make a town contract to purchase paper, plastics, pens, and other products that are high municipal costs, all municipalities have to purchase them, but we can purchase them at cheaper and more green energy replacement products. This would save the town millions of dollars over time. Procurement is the place to save money. It's also the place where a lot of spending is hidden. We're not doing this as well as we could. There are new industries, as I said, that are cheaper than plastic, and when we contract, we will be contracting for green products, and that saves cents on the dollar. For business growth, Greenburgh is a notoriously difficult place for business to develop. And what I would plan to do is welcome new businesses. And every time we see an opportunity to develop, we would invite the businesses to these development places. For the taxpayer, every time you see an empty building, your taxes are higher because there's no tenant paying the full tax rate. And the commercial tax base is weakened by vacancies. We walk upon so many empty and derelict buildings, they're commonplace to us at this point. But now we are at a crisis point. The pandemic has made it so much worse. It's worse for business owners, and it's worse for residents, and it's worse for the tax base. We must put a plan in place to build ourselves out of the devastating effects of COVID-19.
Time is on. Mr. Feiner, 3 minutes will now begin.
Great. My opponent talks about budget changes that she would advocate, but I'd like to ask her why she never spoke out at any of our budget hearings. And before the beginning of this year, she never spoke at any meeting of a town board. And if you're so concerned about how we're spending money and our policies, our economic development policies, you, just like everybody else in the town, should have spoken at hearings and been involved, which you weren't. In 2020 and in 2021, the town portion of the tax bill did not increase. In 2021, it went down slightly. The town portion of the tax bill is, in most cases, about 17% of your entire tax bill. We have a bunch of school districts in the town, so it could be a little less or a little bit more, depending on which school district you live in. So I think that if people are concerned about the tax burden, they have to recognize that the town portion of the tax bill is not the bulk of their bill. If we're going to make a dent in taxes, we have to look at all government entities. I will continue to use volunteers helping analyze specific budgetary issues. The Citizens Committee that helped us analyze refinancing helped save taxpayers over $800,000. We utilize the Citizens Committee reviewing our insurance needs and reviewing our policies. They were very helpful. We created a Citizens Advisory Committee dealing with our water district that has saved significant dollars and helped us address major infrastructure needs. We work with many citizens boards, and I work with a lot of retirees and citizen activists who help review the budget and come up with constructive suggestions as to ways we could save taxpayer dollars. And we're always looking for innovations. I mentioned earlier on, we're one of the first communities in Westchester that has an electric hand that picks up the garbage on our sanitation trucks. Instead of using 3 people, we have 1 employee. We're now coming up with a very innovative initiative, reclamation, recycling of asphalt. We're saving significant dollars. Instead of $27 a ton, it's about $17 a ton to repave some of the roads. That's more, efficiency. So we're going to constantly look for ways of making the town run more efficiently and better. And I welcome everybody's thoughts. And I also encourage people who have comments to show up at town board meetings and speak out, because if you're quiet, like my opponent was, we can't benefit from your recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Feiner. Our next topic will be business and growth. In this section, you will each have 3 minutes to answer the following questions. Greenburgh is a notoriously difficult place for businesses to develop. What do you plan to do to change that? Second, what will you do to improve the business district on Central Avenue in Edgemont and Hartsdale? For example, there's an abandoned old spa, empty storefronts, and more. Finally, will either of you prioritize Central Park Avenue as an area of transit-oriented growth by offering more housing, walkability, and dedicated bus lanes? Mr. Feiner, you will be going first, and your 3 minutes begins now.
Okay. The comprehensive plan supports smart growth development concepts, density within mixed-use corridors, access, to transit. Actually, I got my start in politics. I was the one who came up with the concept of Westchester to Manhattan express bus service. I started the first Westchester to Manhattan bus service that later was expanded by the county. Westchester County commended our comprehensive plan, saying that the high level of detail in the plan is evidence of years of work that went into creating the most comprehensive plan that they have on file from Westchester municipalities. We're looking at mixed use for the Four Corners in Hartsdale, and we expect a report from our consultant sometime in the coming weeks. We expect a public-private partnership, and we'll be working with leaders of the community to address traffic issues and also to address flooding on Central Avenue, because we have to address the flooding issues if we're going to be successful in redeveloping that section of the town. We also hired an economic development coordinator. My opponent criticized us for not spending a lot more on the coordinator, but we anticipate that we will apply for and receive significant grants. So we'll be able to get the maximum amount of service at the least cost for the taxpayers, because we have to work smartly, but we also need a partnership with the community, because one of the problems in Greenburgh is many times when a developer comes in and says they want to build, the community opposes it. So what we are doing now is we're creating land use committees made up of citizens, people who are involved in the community. They work with the town and they work to resolve issues, and we've been successful. We approved an assisted living facility on Dobbs Ferry Road, Brightview, and we worked with the immediate neighborhood getting that approved. A land use committee, we're working with citizens on battery storage facilities, and I'm optimistic that they'll come up with some constructive suggestions that we could implement, make that happen. I'm also extremely proud of the fact that Regeneron anticipates over $1 billion of work in the town of Greenburgh. Regeneron recently met with the town to discuss a 200,000 square foot campus expansion, one of many, and that's jobs. That's great opportunities
Thank you, Mr.
for the
Feiner.
community.
Ms. Young, your 3 minutes begins now.
Okay, my economic development plan has 4 key parts. 1, to invest in our workforce. We need to retain our workers in their prime working years by making it affordable to stay. We can do this with affordable housing by expanding broadband access and by creating on-ramp job training, like what I did at Today's Students, Tomorrow's Teachers for students who wanted to enter into the field of education, but also with public-private partnerships for job training. Biden and Cuomo's plans for infrastructure include broadband access as a funding stream within infrastructure. Funding to create broadband should not come from the town's budget. It is coming from the state and federal governments. Broadband is a way to infuse economic development, but it is also a way that people living on the margins have access to broadband without spending the money they need for food or medicine. Right now, getting broadband is costly through cable companies and phone companies. The new stimulus will produce monies to ensure every American and every Greenburgh resident has access. The town's responsibility is to ensure all residents have access and all living and former public housing developments have it. 2, to support existing small businesses in Greenburgh. We need to build the capacity of our Main Street, Central Avenue, to remain solvent and thrive in the post-pandemic world. We need to assist small businesses to grow from brick and mortar shops into 21st century e-commerce markets so they can sell countywide, nationwide, and even globally. There is no reason for our moms and pops to not realize that level of business success. We need to work with the SBA and Westchester County Industrial Development Agency for loans to support small businesses already here and to bolster businesses in Hartsdale, Central Avenue, Edgemont, and Elmsford. We need to create enterprise zones unique to specific commercial corridors. Work with the county on incentives and grants already available, but we have not asked or used them. It's called the Westchester County Catalyst Small Business Assistance Program. We've just left it on the table. We're ready to pick up the ball and run with it on day one, should I get elected. We pitch new business with information on demographics, infrastructure, workforce development, schools, and other incentives to attract them to Greenburgh. We would go after underutilized and derelict buildings. Complex problems require long-term planning to turn these properties around. We will do it one by one with community stakeholders and give them the credit. We can't keep driving past empty buildings so we barely even notice them anymore. It's time to change this. Lastly, if Greenburgh had innovative leadership, there would be no need for me to run. The current supervisor wants to know where I was. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Young.
For our next topic, we will be discussing Edgemont Incorporation. Each candidate will have 4 minutes to speak, and Ms. Young, you will be speaking first. The 2 questions are, first, are you willing to let Edgemont vote on incorporating itself as a village? Second, what are your views on Edgemont leaving the unincorporated part of the town of Greenburgh, and why? Ms. Young, your time starts now.
Thank you for this question. This is such an unfortunate situation that has been brewing over more than a decade. It is the fact that developments got zoning variances to build without the input of the community of Edgemont that has really sent them into this incorporation movement. It is that, it is lack of budget transparency and not feeling represented. You are asking me as a candidate if I would be willing to let Edgemont vote on incorporating itself as a village. There is no role that the supervisor has that can prevent people in a democratic society from voting. What is happening is a prevention of the petition to even be brought forward. That is quite unfortunate, and people feel like their voices are suppressed. To answer your question, why would I run to be town supervisor if I support incorporation? It is my goal to try to keep the town whole. People who are represented always have a say, whether they live in Edgemont or Fairview or anywhere else in the town. That is what representative government means. I would never drive a further wedge by strategies like forcing residents to choose between hearings held on Father's Day or spending time with their families. Divisive leadership is passé and might have been accepted pre-COVID-19, but in order to build back better, we must unify and stay united. In order to do that, the supervisor must lead and be accountable to all of Greenburgh's residents and foster inclusion and transparency in land use decisions and budget decisions 90 days prior to the vote. Open and transparent conversations with those who will be the most affected, and then with the entirety of the town. Some of the tactics that have been in play include requiring the naming of minors to prevent the petition to go forward. That is very unfortunate. You all are minors. Your privacy is important to me as my own privacy is important. This is an unfortunate situation we're in, and I would ask that if I have given the privilege of being your supervisor, that both Edgemont and other parts of the town give me a chance to position the town as a unified body with a leader that listens to everyone and includes everyone in decisions that affect where they live. Thank you.
Mr. Feiner, your time starts now.
I think that the town is better together. We have built sidewalks in Edgemont. We've provided residents with really fantastic, services. I think we've been responsive to residents who have had concerns, and we've tried enhancing people's quality of life, as well as provided students with fantastic internship programs. But during the past few years, Edgemont and corporation advocates submitted petitions that were found insufficient because they did not meet the criteria required by New York State law. What I did, and the appellate division of the New York State Supreme Court agreed with me, was that the petition did not comply with the law. And I would like to ask my opponent whether she would do the same amount of scrutiny as I did to make sure that the petition is legally sufficient before a referendum is scheduled. I did not create the law. The state legislature created it. And the courts, the appellate division of the state Supreme Court, they agreed with my interpretation, of the petitions. And if the next town supervisor looks the other way, Edgemont could very well decide to break away, and the ramifications to the rest of the town are going to be devastating. The rest of the town could lose as much as $19 million a year in funding, which would make it very, very difficult for the town to continue to provide quality services and programs to residents who are most deserving and in need of it. So what I would like to do, and my opponent at one point supported this, was ask for state legislation that would enable the entire town, not only residents of Edgemont, to vote on whether or not they should be able to break away. Because if a small group of people in Edgemont decide to vote to break away, and the rest of the town is devastated financially because of that, that's not fair. That's not democracy. Everybody in the unincorporated section of town should have a vote. I also believe that there should be state legislation, that there should be an independent financial review that residents of Edgemont and the rest of the town could read, that would be prepared by the state controller before any vote takes place. I feel, very, very strongly that residents should be able to hear an independent assessment as to what the financial ramification should be, and that before an incorporation petition is submitted to the voters, there should be actually a proposed budget. So everybody would be able to analyze the budget and see how it would impact them and the rest of the town. So in summary, incorporation would be devastating for the rest of the town. It could lead to other wealthier areas breaking away. When we're talking about Black Lives Matter, it's possible that the long-term ramifications would be that Fairview would be isolated because the wealthier sections of the town would also want to break away, and it will be almost impossible to fund important programs that serve the neediest populations in our community. I also believe that Edgemont residents will find it's also not in their financial interest, to break away. So let's make it better together and work together to keep the town a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Feiner.
Thank you. Our next topic will be on environmentally friendly practices. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to speak for this section. Mr. Feiner, you will be speaking first. The questions are as follows. How would you create and expand recycling opportunities and enforce recycling laws? Second, what is your commitment to shifting municipalities to green energy, whether it be vehicles, buildings, etc.? Mr. Feiner, your time begins now.
Great. We have a robust and evolving food recycling program, an organic recycling program, and I hope to implement curbside pickup of organic recycling. We were the second community in Westchester to do that, and it's been very, very successful. One of my goals is to establish a recycling center similar to Scarsdale. Residents would be able to leave furniture, all sorts of recycling, and even do what they do in Scarsdale, have a take it and leave it program so people could share with others and also with people who are less fortunate items that they do not need. The town has sponsored a Solarize Westchester campaign. We launched a community solar effort this year. Residents could save up to 10% of their electricity costs. We also have implemented a program where we have reduced the barriers to solar installations. Greenburgh was second, I think the first community in Westchester to place solar panels at the roofs of the town hall, years ago. And we want to encourage more people to, and more businesses to solarize their buildings. We're working with Sustainable Westchester on green initiatives. And one of the very exciting initiatives that we've implemented is called Solarize Westchester, as I said, where you could save 10% of your electricity plus. We also have retrofitted all the LED lights, and that has saved taxpayers dollars because the lights are more energy efficient. We adopted way back in 2009 a green building ordinance. We're pushing for more electric charging, stations. We also are working with our planning board, coming up with more green initiatives and new developments. And in 2021, a citizens group working with the town has been working to come up with a plan to facilitate battery storage facilities, new technologies in appropriate locations around the town with regulations. So we worked with the community and we're working hard to try to come up with a plan that makes sense for the community. So those are some things that we've done. We're going to be buying more electric cars. And again, we want to be tops when it comes to recycling. I'm also pleased that the Greenburgh Nature Center hired a new executive director, and we're going to be working with the Greenburgh Nature Center to promote a greener planet and to help everybody come up with great ideas that can make our communities more efficient.
Thank you. Ms. Young, your 3 minutes begin now.
Thank you. This campaign is endorsed by Sunrise Westchester, and they are young people who are committed and part of a global body of climate change activists. You might be familiar with Greta Thunberg out of Sweden, but the majority of climate change activists are people of color, and they are informing me on exciting transitions off of the fossil fuel industry and on how to get onto renewable energy like tidal energy, solar energy, and wind energy. The state already has funding available to assist municipalities on broad renewable energy initiatives. And I would like to partner with the state and climate change activists like Sunrise on how to bring this to Greenburgh. While my administration would continue recycling and food scrap programs, which are great, and I thank our town employees for their hard work, and quite frankly, the supervisor for his leadership on this. But we need to expand programs and make them bigger, broader, and make sure more residents can take advantage of them. We need to look to improve the programs that exist, and we need Greenburgh Parks also to have an initiative called the Cleanup Initiative, similar to the Westchester County Pitch-In for Parks. Our parks and recreation departments do terrific jobs, and we should support them as a community and continue to green our parks. There's also a move for public broadband access. I would like to see that in each park and each public space so people could gather and enjoy being on their devices in our parks and other areas of the town that are publicly funded. Beyond that, on a much bigger and broader scale, we must embark on a path toward bringing green businesses to Greenburgh. This is where new business is headed, and we can wait and watch other suburbs get into those businesses, or we could take action to incentivize and attract them to Greenburgh. Green business means using renewable energy sources, like I mentioned before, and we can attract them here and then purchase from them as a municipality, thus bringing down the cost for everyone because we're buying in bulk. We can move Greenburgh off of fossil fuels. We can ask the county to partner with us with these initiatives, and we know the Board of Legislators is leaning toward this direction. So this should be a really easy and fruitful partnership. We can look to create jobs in new industries like vertical farming or freight farming, working with car dealerships to provide rebates for fuel-injected engines and get into new hybrid or battery-operated engines.
Ms. Young, your time has elapsed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again, candidates. Our 10th topic will discuss the subjects of drugs, alcohol, and gambling. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to speak. Ms. Young, you will be speaking first. What are your stances on the following? Current gambling regulations, recreational marijuana, and the legal drinking age. What changes would you attempt to make as town supervisor? Ms. Young, your 3 minutes will now begin.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say that I'm very happy that adult use of cannabis is finally legalized. Minority communities were greatly harmed by the so-called war on drugs, even though statistics prove that white and Black people smoked marijuana or used marijuana at the same rate. But for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, we were arrested at much higher rates, fined and jailed for the same exact use. And this is a chance to correct that harm. As businesses selling adult use cannabis products offer to open in Greenburgh, we need to make sure that the profits, employment, and tax dollars stay in the Greenburgh community. But before even that, we need to seriously monitor both the location and potency of these products. I would create a marijuana oversight board to do this work. I know that people are worried and scared about this impending change, and we need to hear those voices from the community and include them in conversations over where public safety can be enacted for all. The Marijuana Oversight Board should have been implemented a year ago with proponents parents, patients, doctors, law enforcement, and more. We knew the passing of this legislation was looming for years now. I myself lobbied for it 2 years ago. If elected, my administration would be proactive and serve the residents in a way that is innovative and informed by 21st century thinking. I have no opinion on the drinking age. I think the law will stand as it is now. And as town supervisor, I would charge the Department of Planning and Conservation and Philanthropy and possibly Community Affairs from Greenburgh Police with the task of regular, possibly weekly meetings with county and state officials that are responsible for the rollout of the above law allowing for adult use cannabis. As an executive, you have to take action, and what I would have done months ago, because this has been in discussion, as I said, since 2018, is to seek regulation and keep everyone safe as adult use cannabis laws are enacted. Where would people be allowed to use the product? Maybe we need to create something similar to the open carry law for alcohol. This regulatory commission will ensure to meet the racial equity disparate issue, as well as keep our town safe from any dispensaries and keep them away from schools and playgrounds. Instead of selling marijuana at this level, we could allow for the sale at a safe level to reduce the THC. The way you can make sure that people are less impacted and the negative effects of being, quite frankly, stoned, and that people are more able to function after inhaling and consuming these products. So much can be discussed. In essence, yes, thank you.
Mr. Feiner, your 3 minutes will now begin.
Okay. Working with the police, planning department, recreation department, and community, I believe that we should come up with regulations relating to where marijuana could be sold. Policies for parks also should be discussed. I do not believe that we should opt out of the law, but feel that we should approve regulations. The statute allows local governments to pass local laws and regulations governing the time, the place, and manner of cannabis retail dispensaries or consumption venues as long as it's practical. If we opt out, people will go to neighboring communities and those communities will benefit from the revenue. I believe that the legislature did the right thing passing the law. Marijuana arrests are disproportionately minorities and poor people, which is uncalled for. The legislation is fairer and more just what the state approved. I am pleased that the state's Cannabis Control Board will be authorized to regulate the advertising, branding, marketing, and packaging of cannabis products, and that rules will be established regarding the accuracy of information and rules restricting marketing and advertising to youth. The new law could shrink the underground market. Another concern that some people have is detecting marijuana while residents are driving. The state needs to help local police departments develop drug training proposals, and the costs of that should be absorbed by the state. My opponent criticized me for the lack of being proactive on this issue. And again, I should mention that if you thought that I was failing to be proactive, you could have spoken out any time during the past year. This is the first time I heard you speak out on this matter, because I think the town will always try being proactive. In fact, in March of 2019, my first campaign manager was Phil Weiser, who is now attorney. He lived in Hastings. He's now Attorney General of the state of Colorado. And I had called Phil, and he arranged on March 19th, 2019, for some experts from Colorado to meet with the town board to discuss their experiences dealing with marijuana. So one of the follow-up initiatives that I will take is to reach out again to Colorado, to Phil, and to other leaders in Colorado and around the nation, and find out what their experiences are, because I think that if we could learn from communities that have experience with marijuana and come up with regulations that make the most sense for the town.
Thank you, Mr. Feiner. Our next topic will be on community inclusion. Please note that this section will only be 90 seconds long for your response. Mr. Feiner, you will be going first and answering the following questions. How do you plan to include new and diverse voices in your work? And what role do you envision for local organizations, community members, and youth voices in local politics and decisions in Greenburgh? Your 90 seconds begins now.
We have student representatives on various boards, police boards, parks boards. We have a student internship program. Students have met with national leaders. We invite students to speak at many town board meetings each year, highlighting their efforts. We've created land use committees that review land use policies. During the early stages of the pandemic, I created a medical advisory committee that it helped us come up with recommendations how to deal with the pandemic. We created an insurance committee. We created a refinancing committee. We've created technology committees helping us run the town more efficiently and better. I want to mentor future leaders, educating them how to get involved and even run for office. So those are some of the initiatives. We're always looking. We have hundreds of people in the town involved, and we want people to speak out and express themselves, because government works best when it's a partnership, and it also works best when you get lots and lots of ideas. And one of the reasons why I like giving out my phone number, 478-1219 or 438-1343, is because I get great ideas from residents in the community.
Thank you, Mr. Feiner. Ms. Young, your 90 seconds begin now.
Yeah, the answer to this question is outreach. As I stated earlier, I am a coalition builder and a bridge builder, and I manage relationships very well. I have a very extensive network. The supporters of this campaign are members from all incomes and ethnic backgrounds, and I work daily to meet new people and learn their stories. But I take that information and then I lead with it. My support is from grassroots as well as establishment organizations, and I will stay connected with the community through the volunteers and ties to advocacy organizations that I already work with, like the Westchester Women's Agenda, the Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus, Progressive Women of New York, the various faith-based organizations, the Young Democrats of Westchester, your organization, and the Sunrise Movement of Westchester. If I had more time, I would name more. Some of these have continue to uplift me. Others I'm seeking to have stronger relationships with. My decades of working among local organizations, as I mentioned, and my lived experience inform me on how to continue this work into governing.
Thank you, Ms. Young.
For our next section, we will be talking about housing for seniors. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to speak, and Ms. Young, you will be speaking first. The question is, the Federal Housing Commissioner of Greenburgh Housing Authority asked the town to ensure three things. A, an independent investigation into the removal of the seniors during the height of the pandemic. B, a transparent and open process of appointing a new GHA board member so people in the entire town can apply. C, a pause on removing any additional tenants until GHA returns the displaced seniors. Would you both support this? And what would each of you do to ensure this happens? Ms. Young, your time starts now.
Thank you. While I strongly advocate for an independent investigation, some disabled residents were put into housing on a second floor walk-up. A transparent process about how board members are selected. There's an open position right now, and it's not even posted on the town website. And a pause on removing tenants. One thing is clear. The current supervisor was not an advocate for these residents of Greenburgh. He should have been the first person to demand from all involved organizations that vulnerable residents have the right to be heard and that their safety be the highest priority. It is an outrage that I take personally as a former resident. How did this happen? And to say, where was I? I'm a volunteer. I'm a resident. The supervisor is responsible to me, not the other way around. Perhaps it comes from a leadership style that emphasizes scattershot, one-off problem solving. How do I avoid types of complex issues as a supervisor? I start with the assumption that the town is accountable to public housing residents in policy and advocacy. The future includes their voices, respects their voices, and second, I would implement a mechanism for the residents of the Greenburgh Public Housing to have a voice and a weekly report to the town board on how they are being treated and how their quality of life is being impacted. And then we will evaluate plans to address concerns. Third, I would also seek to immediately publish bylaws, regulations, meeting notes, and agendas of the Greenburgh Housing Authority. They have not adequately responded.
Mr. Feiner, your time starts now.
Okay, well, I'd like to again say to my opponent, where were you? You never spoke at any meetings before the senior housing development was approved. We had many hearings over 5 years, many meetings, and you were absent. You waited until the contract was finalized with the private investors when it was too late to delay moving before you spoke up, and I think that's unconscionable. The authority of the town board is limited because the housing authority is independent. But I also want to mention that I've written to every single senior at least twice, and so far I have not received complaints from residents. There's one woman who complained, and she was offered a space heater, and she didn't want the space heater. When it comes to housing, I'm a big supporter of affordable housing. In 1996, during my early years as town supervisor, we passed the first set-aside requirement for affordable housing, 10% affordable units in the entire, the first community that required 10% in the entire state. We extended affordability set-asides to the CA district in 2008. In 2010, HUD exempted Greenburgh from the housing settlement based on the town's commitment to affordability. We rezoned West Half for affordable housing. We worked with the county to turn West Half into affordable housing.
Feiner.
We've done so much.
Thank you both. Now, to close off the forum, each candidate will have 30 seconds to explain to voters why they are running for town supervisor and any other information they would like voters to know. Mr. Feiner, you will be speaking first, and your 30 seconds begin now.
Okay, we've maintained a AAA bond rating. The last two tax hikes, budgets had no tax hikes. We basically, Moody's praised our town for having a sound financial position with strong fiscal management. We built affordable housing. We're doing more with less. I'm accessible. I always return phone calls. You don't get an answering machine. Our parks and our programs are outstanding. And if people have any complaints, again, please call me at 438-1343 or 478-1219.
Thank you. Ms. Young, your 30 seconds begin now. Make sure to unmute.
I thank you again, Samika. A Tasha D. Young administration wouldn't be secretive. It would be transparent and disciplined, building off of best practices. It would be data-driven and resource-filled, inclusive and responsive should I be elected. I have 6 policy points I want to emphasize. Economic development by attracting new businesses, affordable housing for the workplace to live in Greenburgh, public and private partnerships, utilizing government resources available, COVID-19 vaccine booster and economic recovery plan, and diverse hiring by age, race, gender, and other demographics. I have announced, and I will have my platform on my website tonight at votetasha.com. That is VOTETASHA.com. Please stop by, and I hope I earned your vote. And if not, I will continue to work hard to earn your vote on June 22nd, 2021.
Thank you to both candidates and viewers for making this forum possible. We strongly encourage all of you to go out and vote. The primary election is set for June 22nd, 2021, and the deadline to register to vote is Friday, May 28th and early voting begins on Saturday, June 12th. The deadline to request an absentee ballot is June 15th, and the general election is set for November 2nd, 2021.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. Good luck, Supervisor Feiner.
Congratulations. This is the new way of shaking hands.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
sir.
Thank you.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.
As Samika said, thank you all for taking the time out of your evening to come to this event. Thank you to both candidates for really doing a wonderful job answering all the questions asked to them and for providing such a wonderful experience for you all. If you would like to learn more about the Westchester Youth Congress or inquire about future partnerships, please check out our website. It should be in the chat, but it is www.westchesteryouthcongress.org. There's also a link to a form in the chat as well, where we would love to hear some feedback, as well as you can sign up for email updates if you'd like to see what else the Westchester Youth Congress is up to in the near future. Our social media is also either at Westchester Youth Congress on Instagram or the Westchester Youth Congress page on Facebook and on YouTube. And we would really, really appreciate all of you for taking the time out of your day to come here. A special thanks to Dylan Johns, Samika Agarwal, Avik Agarwal, and Jeremy Morton for their participation in the event tonight. Thank you all and have a great rest of